Greetings, everybody. This is Dr. Ray Lindley, the Executive Director of Array Global Educational Services. It's a real privilege to be with you again and to present to you today another outstanding workshop. Before we begin today, I want to make special notice of this time of the year, which happens to fall for both the Muslims and the Christians. For the Muslims, we want to say to you, may Allah bless all of us this Ramadan with forgiveness and mercy and peace, and bring us all closer to Him and each other. And for the Christians, we want to say, have a wonderful Easter, celebrating what Easter means to us. And the thing that I know about working with different nationalities and different faiths, we all want to be striving to be the very best people we can be. So welcome everyone, and we're going to go ahead now. I'll first introduce Dr. Jake Frankham, who will bring a few words, and then we'll proceed.
Welcome everyone, and just to echo what Dr. Ray said, we just have a warm welcome to all those who are celebrating Ramadan, and then also during this beautiful Easter weekend. Well, at least it's beautiful in my area of the world. Also, would like to recognize and just remind a lot of people of some of the activities that we have going on right now. We have an academic competition called the Stella Science Fair. And last year we had hundreds of students participate from all over the world. Please get onto our website or our Facebook page and send that information to your students. Get them involved. It's an online science fair where students submit their videos. And those videos are evaluated by judges. There are cash prizes, and it's a great way to get students engaged and interact with other students from around the world. We also have a program going on that's called Me and My Community, a great time for Ramadan, for Easter, or whatever religion that you are. It gets your students to do service projects. If they do a certain amount of hours of service, they get a certificate, get some recognition. And what a great way to give back to your community right now. And talking about giving back to our communities, we would like to recognize two outstanding educators that we have come to know and appreciate and respect. The first one, hopefully you've seen this on our Facebook page, Mr. Muhammad Abdel Hadi from Shabab Al Fahad International Schools in Saudi Arabia. We know him well. We've been to his school. He is our Administrator of the Year for Array Global. So we'd just like to congratulate him for his outstanding work in his school. Many things that he has done, but the biggest thing is helping his school move through the school improvement process, and also helping his school throughout the COVID situation in providing a quality distance-based education program. The second person we wanted to recognize is our Teacher of the Year, Miss Anani from Concordia College in Yola, Nigeria. And she has some amazing stories about what she's been able to do in Nigeria when her school, her area were under insurgency attacks, and she still just held true to education and her students in helping them and supporting them. Soon we'll have some videos posted on our social media, our YouTube pages, that we'd like to have everyone watch and see and be inspired by these wonderful educators. And so we do have some great things coming up. Please follow us on our social media, follow us on our website. And if we can help you out in any way, please let us know. Back to you, Dr. Ray.
Good, and thank you. After the presentation today, we are going to be announcing what our plan is for the the May workshop on May 21st. So please stay tuned for that announcement, because I think it will be something that you really will be pleased to see. Now, I want to introduce Mr. Danny Eichelberger. Danny is Associate Director for Array Global. We're really glad to have him as part of our team, and he works with several of you already and works definitely with us in the leadership of Array Global. So Danny, it's great to have you with us today, and say a few words and introduce our presenter for the day.
Absolutely, thank you, Mr. Ray. This is a real fortunate opportunity for us, and good evening to all our friends, and good afternoon to those of us in the States. We're fortunate to have our good friend and educator, Miss Shawna Jessen, join us today. She has just an immense amount of experience, and she's got 27 years in the Clark County School District here in Nevada. And she has been able to spend 17 of those years in administrative capacities, helping schools, helping central office, and helping schools turn around. She took her the elementary she retired from in the summer of 2021. She turned that school from a 2-star to a 5-star, which is the highest performance levels for a school. And we're so anxious to hear. She's got a big love for math. She's going to be coaching us and talking us through some of the math strategies and those base level skills that teachers need to have to move the needle for students. And we're also excited. She was on the superintendent's honor roll since 2019. She took that school to very high levels. And we're proud to have her here and grateful to turn the time over to her. And Shawna, we're looking forward to it.
Thank you, Danny. Greetings, everyone. I should say good evening to most of you and good morning to some. It's such an honor to be here with you today. I'm learning about this organization and the good work it does, and I'm humbled that I was invited to be in front of you. I hope that something that I say will resonate with you. Danny kind of talked a little bit about my professional credentials, but I also have some really wonderful hobbies that bring joy to my life as well as education. One of them is singing. And I'm afraid I do it all the time. I'm on a little singing app and I spend 3 hours of my day singing with people and interacting with people that way. So I've been fortunate to meet people from around the world that way. And it's so wonderful to see us as an education family coming together to try to do something good to help kids achieve. And singing is like math, which is why I bring it up. Sometimes when I tell people that I love math and I love my favorite subject to teach was math, at least where I'm from, that wasn't a very popular statement. We find that most teachers, at least in the elementary level, which is where the majority of my time has been, are reading teachers. And so they don't come to the space very well prepared to teach mathematics. And if they do, it's a pretty simple understanding. So early on, the reason I became an expert at math is because I didn't know how to teach it. So I know that in this audience, there are some of you who feel very comfortable and confident teaching math or being leaders of schools and supervising math, and some of you who do not. So you'll have to pardon me. I'm gonna go forward as if everybody is trying to learn today this from the same place. So we need to ask ourselves then, what can we do as teachers and leaders to improve math achievement? So I'm going to throw my PowerPoint up here, but before I do, I want to say a few housekeeping things. Sometimes mathematician people talk in what was told to me last night is mathlish. Sometimes we talk and say words that others don't understand. So if you do not understand, please type it in the chat. Jacob is watching the chat for us, and so he'll interrupt me and tell me if something is confusing. I would love to entertain questions. In fact, I would love to have conversations. And if I was with you face to face, we would be talking a lot. Unfortunately, we have a short window of time and a lot to cover. So this is going to kind of come at you like a fire hose. It's going to be a lot of information. So please record your questions in the chat. And then at the end, I'll save some time so we can have some discussion. I hope that what I say resonates with you. And I hope that you leave today with at least one good action step that you can do from having spent this time with us today. That's my goal. All right. So let's see. Did I cover everything, Ray?
I believe you did.
Okay. I was hesitating to call Mr. Ray, Dr., all those things that got lost. All right, I'm going to try to share my PowerPoint, and I'm going to go ahead and run the show for now, unless that becomes a problem. If for some reason we disengage or get disconnected, then you guys can just pick the PowerPoint up and try to make something out of it. But hopefully that doesn't happen. So I'm sure you've had all kinds of technological wonderful things occur. Also, I wanted to mention that if you want to say something, we need you to put it in the chat, not just raise your hand, because there's so many of you that we might miss your hand. So please make sure that you make the comments over there. All right, I'm thinking that we're ready to roll here. Okay, so teaching tools for math, that's a broad topic. And kind of, I want you to think of this kind of like a commercial for all of elementary mathematics and K-8 mathematics at least. And I wanted one disclaimer. I am not an advanced mathematician. I do not love to do calculus. I do not love to do engineering problems at that level, but I do love helping kids open their eyes and awaken to their abilities to problem solve and do math. So my expertise is in helping children learn math. That's my first disclaimer for you. So don't ask me any hard math problems in the chat or I'll say, give me 2 hours. But anyway, so the first thing I wanted to talk to you about is kind of what I'm hoping you'll leave with today. I hope that you can just to know before you leave that the most important things we teach to students is a good sense of number and how to problem solve. There's a lot of other work that we do in our math classrooms, but those are the two most important areas. And if you want to focus your school on improved achievement, these are two areas that you can just quickly pick up and do something about. I'm going to say this at the end of the session, I hope I remember to, but I want to say it to you right now. If you have a pencil, write this down. Energy flows where the attention goes. So if you put your mind in your classroom and schools on math, then your energy will flow toward math. If you put your attention on other things, your energy will flow there. So you have to make a conscious effort to have some of your attention turn this direction in order for it to improve. So we're going to give you some tools to use that you can take away. We're going to talk about math understanding, what it means to truly understand math. And then we're going to think about what teachers and leaders can do. So I had the opportunity to do math audits when I was working as the math coordinator for the Clark County School District. And we would go into classrooms, and it's sort of like the accreditation process. We would take a bunch of data and information, then we would compile it and would give it back to the school. And then we would go back and have interactions about how they could improve their math programs. And I asked teachers just all the time, so what are your concerns about teaching math? And nobody said, I don't know how to do division. Nobody told me, I wish I had more opportunity to learn math. They just asked basic teaching things like, are they getting it? And this is so much work. Am I focused on the right things? And when do I teach the algorithm and when do I use manipulatives? For those of you who are not familiar with that vocabulary term, an algorithm is that process by which we formally solve a problem. So it's usually numbers and symbols that are algorithms. And so when do I use the toys and the tools, and when do I use those tips and tricks that we know are efficient? And then how can I be certain that they're getting practice opportunities? And finally, the other thing they ask me all the time, how do I grade this? If I move to a more problem-based approach, if I'm doing more hands-on problem-solving activities with multi-steps, how do you assign a grade to this nonsense? So those are the things that I would get back from people as I was in classrooms. And it sort of shaped how I started to see the work that I did with teachers. So I want to talk to you about the wedding cake of math. But before I do, I want to tell you a good strategy we're going to use this morning is we're going to do a stop and share. If you are working with a group of people, and I know some of you are together watching this all in one place, pick a partner and they're going to be your share buddy. And along the way, I'm going to stop and say, all right, turn to your partner and share something that resonated with you or something that you still have a question about. If you are alone, then this is your partner. Grab your pen and write down something you agree with or that you're still questioning. So today I would stop and say, turn to your partner and say something that you are concerned about with teaching math or supervising math in your school. So let me just give you about 10 seconds of think time to talk to each other about the first concern that comes to your mind. Okay, I'm going to keep rolling because we have lots to say. So we're not going to share out those concerns. It's just going to give you shape for what we're about to talk about. So the wedding cake of math, we teach content standards and process standards. The content standards are the what we teach, the number sense, the algebra, the data, that's the content. And then we teach processes of math, how kids relate to life, how they solve problems, those process standards. Whichever side we're teaching, it's imperative that we give a strong foundation. And then the next layer, just like in the wedding cake, we have to be careful with our strategic layer or the cake will fall. So we have to give students strategies in those areas, and then we can expect mastery at the top of the cake. A lot of times what we see teachers do is they go straight to mastery. So they will, for example, give lots of worksheets that practice basic facts, but they don't give any strategies or any foundation. They just go straight to the test. So we're going to give you caution about that. Make sure in math, whatever you do, we talk about the foundation. The other thing that was apparent after doing the audits was we would go in rooms and we would see students totally unengaged. Sometimes they would be misbehaving, sometimes they would be sleepy, or they would just be looking at the ceiling, but they weren't engaged in the lesson. And so we started thinking, oh, it's classroom management strategies. They need to do things to try to keep the kids behaving. But what we realized is it wasn't about that at all. Typically, kids do not understand because they don't have that foundation, or because they can't engage with what's happening in the math. They miss pieces of the cake from before or layers of the bricks from before. So we have to go back in math. We're always cycling back, picking up the skills that they had before you can move forward. And then the other thing is kids will be bored, because if they already know the concept, they're not going to engage with you. So you have to kind of question yourself as a leader and a teacher to set your rooms up so that kids can be continually exploring in case they're already a little bit ahead of you. So that's just a little commercial for that. But there is this guy. If you haven't heard from him, his name is Eddie Wu. And he has opened a channel called WooTube. And he has many examples. I wish I'd have put his WooTube in the slide, but his name is Eddie Wu, and he has many examples of engaging lessons, ways that he teaches his students that are fun and relatable. But the thing about Eddie that I wanted to talk about is he was one of those folks like me who didn't really love math in the beginning and came to love it as he learned about it. And he has given us a little informational video here that we're going to just take 1 minute and 34 seconds to watch Eddie. Now that he's been on this journey and he's opened this worldwide channel. He happens to be from Australia. The kids are learning to hate math, and they're not learning to, we are not producing enough mathematicians and scientists to continue to solve these global problems. So it's not just something we wish kids could do better. It's literally something that keeps us up at night, that we have to make changes in the math program to get them thinking and doing more math. So the important thing about that is that we have the power to do that in our little classrooms simply by teaching them how to engage in math and how to build that foundation. So we're going to scoot into an example of how that can look in a classroom. If we want to see understanding, I'm not going to go through all of these right now, I'm looking at the clock and there's other stuff I want to get through, but this will be in the presentation. This is how you know kids are understanding math, the way he was talking about it, and the things that we're trying to reach for or have them be able to do. We want them to recognize relationships, be able to do the math in different ways, understand what comes before and after, apply to real life. All of that is what this slide is about. I think we kind of covered that. So we're going to watch an example of a math process here in this video clip, which I'm going to have to go out and do this again. This is a video of Mompot Cattle. If you haven't seen this clip, it's funny. It's from olden days, way back in the 50s, I believe. And their son is a lawyer, and he's coming home to try to help them understand how to share some money. And they are going to solve a multiplication problem. And I want you to think about what is the problem in this, this picture. So I have to stop share and I have to new share. Right, I think I have to click on it though. Hold on. Sorry, everybody. I thought I had it pulled up and it's gone. Well, it's not that important. If I can't get it in 1 second, hold on.
If you can't, Shawna, I have it ready.
Okay, throw it up. That's
Okay,
great.
throw it up.
I closed it somehow, so that'd be great.
Okay, here we go. Whoops, hold on.
Oh, we have no sound.
I muted it.
And 25% divided between the 5 of us. Yida, Crowbar, myself, Tom, and the baby. That makes 5% for each one of us.
Billy, you're cheating yourself. If there's 25% divided among the 5 of you, that's 14% apiece.
Oh, no, listen, Pa. I wouldn't cheat you. You know I wouldn't. Now, look here. I'll show you. Let me rub this out here. And now, 25 divided by 5 is 5. You see, 5 won't go into 2, will it? No. But 5 goes into 25 5 times, you see?
No, you're wrong, Billy. Now, I'm a pretty good mathematician. Now, 5 into 25, 5 won't go into 2, will it?
No.
But 5 goes into 5 once. Now, we didn't use the 2 before, so we bring it down here. Now, 5 into 20 goes 4 times. There you are. 5 into 25, 14.
No, look, Pa. Let me prove it to you now by multiplication. 5 times 5. 5 times 5 is 25.
Really, I'm surprised you're learning.
Huh?
I'm surprised that you're learning. Now I'll show you. 5 times 14 is 25. 5 times 4 is 20. 5 times 1 is 5. 25. That's it.
No, look, Ma. Look, you're wrong there because I'll prove it to you. We'll put down 5 14s here. 14. There. Now I'll prove to you by addition that 5 14s is not 25. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20.
21, 22, 23, 24, 25. There you are. Better brush up, Billy. I don't want to see you boys cheated.
So we can see from the video that if we don't provide foundation, we can have lots of problems. One of the things that, I don't know, am I sharing my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Trying to get there it is. So from the Ma and Pa video, we can see that if we don't have the foundation, then the algorithm themselves can get kind of confusing. So I'm just going to give you an example of how this looks at an elementary level. I already talked about that. Okay, so when do I teach the algorithm? This is one of the biggest things that teachers say. He tried to show some tricks to it, and they showed some tricks that didn't work. One of the things that we know in any content centered in math is students have to be accurate, efficient, and flexible. That particular example shows us they had a math problem where the parents were not accurate. They were flexible, they had some different ideas, but it wasn't a very efficient way to solve the problem. So we want to make sure when we're teaching students eventually that they get to an efficient strategy. So if we were, for example, drawing groups of 5 and we had to draw tally marks out every time we did a multiplication problem, that would get to be pretty long if we had a long multiplication problem. So we have invented algorithms as a way to be efficient, but that doesn't mean that we're flexible. If all we know is that one trick, then the kids aren't doing multiple ways to solve the problem. So for example, if I was teaching multiplication in 3rd grade, the way I would start in order to build a foundation is I would start concretely. 2 groups of 3 groups of 2 things. Well, feet come in 2 things. So I would choose these feet and say, here are 3 groups of 2. And the students then can find that answer by counting every foot, counting by 2s, spreading a line in half and adding 3 plus 3, but they need to be flexible by understanding how that works. There's always going to be 6 feet, no matter what, in 3 times 2. The answer will always be 6. That's the accurate way. So the next layer then would be pictorially. And then we would use, this is where we use symbols to represent number. This happens to be what we call an array. So this is 3 groups of 2 or 2 groups of 3, depending on how you're looking at it. But either way, the kids can count the squares, they can count by twos, they can do it in half, or all the different ways to be flexible with that. Once they've had lots and lots of practice with that, then I introduce the symbol 3 groups of 2 equals 6. So that's what I'm talking about by being progressional from concrete up to symbol. So you teach the algorithm when it's time to learn to be efficient. We could develop any content. We don't have time to right now, but I'll just refer to this multiplications pattern content strand. In 3rd grade, they learn their early facts. In 2nd grade, they learn to add another dimension to that, and so on. You can see in the examples in the problem. And eventually, if they get to algebra and they have that foundational knowledge, then algebra is not difficult because they're ready to move to that next step. The other thing I want to point out is we need to practice, practice, practice. Traditionally, we just do workbook pages and enrichment pages, but we can put these out in the classroom all the time for them to play the math games. And we definitely need to incorporate a review in the lesson if you want to be successful at moving achievement. But it has to be your focus in your room. There has to be somewhere in your school where it's focused upon, and everybody knows this is something we do. I don't know how homework works where you are. Some students take home homework and some do not. I know that that's different in different regions of the world. But if something goes home with a child, we believe it should be something they know how to do and they should be able to practice and shouldn't require tutoring or extra help to achieve that. So that's my little preach about homework. Anyway, I could talk tons about this, but I'm going to scoot forward because I want to talk about grading. So that was an example of just working through a math problem. But when you're doing problem solving problems where we give students problems to solve, sometimes it's not just the answer that we want to focus on. We want to focus on the whole process. And again, that's a whole extra workshop, but I want to teach you this one strategy that works really well that all teachers should know. First of all, is the problem you're giving them rigorous enough to really let them show you what they know? And do you know what the core of the math is in that problem? And if so, then this is one way you can sort that. And again, this is a whole separate session on its own, but I want you to open your mind to the possibility of these 2 sorts. One thing that I did in my room is if they did a problem about going to the fair and having to solve what the cost of their admission was and how much food they would buy and how many friends they would take, and there were just multiple problems, then I would look at their answer and I would be like, okay, this child has it or they don't have it. If they had it, they just went into this pile. If they didn't have it, then I put them to the side for a minute. If they had it, they just got an assigned grade. If they didn't have it, they got a lesser grade. But the power comes in the next sort. So if you take the pile of kids that have it, and then you ask yourself these questions, do they have it good enough to teach a friend? Then they get a 4, they get full points. If they have it good enough for me, and maybe I see a few mistakes, but they mostly have it, they get a 3. And then in this pile, these kids that don't have it need significant teaching or they're completely lost. And then they get a 2 or 1 based on that. And then, so I don't know how exactly how grading works either everywhere. And different schools have different policies. You can give that 4 a 95 and a 3 an 85 and the 2 a 75 and the 1 a 65, or you can give it a percentage, whatever works in your region. But this idea of having a 2-pile sort and a 4-pile sort is a really good way to share with teachers when they're not sure how to grade those difficult problem solving things. So what can teachers do? Well, the biggest thing we found in the audits is they should talk to each other. We learn from each other. Your schools are filled with professionals who have done this for a while or who might be new and have fresh information, but coming together and doing learning walks is a really powerful way to ask, am I doing this right? Or is there a way I can do it better? And also, we believe in math that you should have lots of it done through games so they don't even know they're practicing their skills. Just a whole nother session in itself as well. We found that one of the key things teachers can do right now, if you're a leader and you're observing classrooms, is to make sure they close their lesson. It seems like a really obvious thing and has nothing to do with math, but your math achievement will improve if teachers simply focus on bringing the lesson to a closure, which is probably a whole nother session. And then you need to decide how you're going to grade the same in your school. So becoming common with the way they did assessments was another key factor. If you do have the privilege in your building to allow teachers to walk, or if you can go to other schools and watch teachers teach, if you cannot, then get online and maybe watch a math lesson that somebody has put up online that's similar to the one you're teaching. But it's really powerful if you can get into a group and ask each other these questions. What was the objective? Where is the math? What did they do that worked? What would I do to improve the lesson? Just the act of talking about it will improve your teaching and improve your scores ultimately. I mean, learning walks can be very precise or very general. Just having them shows evidence that you can improve your instruction. And then this is just a little information. I'll skip through it. We all start as young teachers, or we all hire brand new teachers that really are novices, and then they move to the master teaching level. If you want to skip them to the master teacher level, these are the things that we stated were principles of a master teacher. And I can't remember whose work we get this from. I'll have to look that up and cite it. I didn't have my cites in this PowerPoint, but these are the things that good quality teachers do to move their kids through any content process, but certainly in math as well. You have to know where their students are, and you know where you want them to go. It seems obvious, but that's what a master teacher does. They are able to move their kid from this place they are to the place they want them to be. We give lots of feedback, and we focus on quality rather than quantity. So in math, I would really like to emphasize, do not have them practice 50 problems. Make sure the problems they're practicing are rich and rigorous and quality instead of just a whole bunch. And then you should never work harder than your students. If you're doing all the math on the board, they're not learning anything. So we as leaders, we want to encourage teachers to have their kids definitely involved in the solving of the problem. I just feel like I have so much information, and I'm sorry about that. But so what can leaders do? I wanted to tell you this story about one of the successes we had in our school when we were turning it around. We had what we call the school-wide math competition, and we've done it in a couple ways. The first way was I, as the principal, went into their classrooms and challenged them in basic facts. You could do this as a teacher. If they beat me, they got some sort of a treat or a reward, whatever works. And if I beat them, then they didn't. And then we took the top winners from each grade level, and they came into the multipurpose room, and the whole school watched them challenge me in this math fact race. And it wasn't really intellectual or cognitive or great math or anything, but it was engaging. It was that whole concept of putting the attention and getting the energy to flow there. And everybody was involved, and everybody was thinking about math. And then when we added the problem solving component, it was that much better. They were already on board. So the second thing we did is we put the problem of the day on the board in the multipurpose room. And if they solved it by the end of lunch, their name was put into a bucket and they won something from a drawing. Again, it wasn't just about giving them a prize. It was about everybody doing something together and being engaged and excited that we were all doing something at the same time. So as a school leader, you can provide incentives and competitions. And the other thing we do is we can facilitate these learning walks, find ways for our teachers to talk to each other and have these discussions. And then one thing, and this is terrible, this is my error. This is one of my typos here. So what we want to do when we're thinking about professionally developing our students is our teachers and teachers ourselves is we need to learn more math. If there's any way you can take a math class or a math methods class again, the more confidence you get in the content, the better you would be at teaching it. So we actually provided math classes. Here's how you teach number. Here's how you teach algebra. And then as the teachers took that and felt confident in their math knowledge, they were more confident in teaching to their students. So there's just a lot of things that we can do as leaders that put the focus there in general. But once again, the concluding thought is that energy will flow where the attention goes. And it's not about magical, wonderful silver bullets. It's about focusing on what's important and providing time for teachers to develop. And that's what we found is the best way to raise your scores. So I think I stopped at the right time. Am I early or late?
You're doing fine.
I wondered if
time-wise.
there was any questions at this point that we want to stop and entertain. I didn't give you enough time to stop and think, but it was a lot. So
Shawna, I just want to add something that perhaps I've added before, but it goes along with what you've been saying. When our son was in the 4th grade and we went to the teacher conference, because teacher you hear, and the kids at that time weren't going to the teacher conference. And so our teacher was concerned because our son was not completing his homework or his work in class. And so I said, could you give me an example? So she gave me a paper that he had turned in, and it had 20 two-digit addition problems, 23 plus 17. There were 20 of those problems. He had done 3, and that's all. And so when we went home.
but if you gave him a deck of cards and had him play war, he would have done 50 problems.
Yeah. So when we went home, of course, he wanted to know what the teacher said and, so forth. And I said, well, your teacher is concerned that you're not finishing your work. And he said, like what? So I showed him the paper. He had done 3 of 20 problems. And I'll never forget, he said to me, Dad, look at that. And I said, okay, I'm looking at it. And he said, how many problems are there? 20. How many did I do? 3. Did I do all 3 of those right? And I said, yes, you did. Why do I have to do 17 more
Exactly.
to show her I know how to do it? And you kind of hit on that just a little bit ago,
Yeah.
is because sometimes we go over and over and over, and it's really understanding the basic concepts. And once they've demonstrated, like when you had your 4 up there, once they demonstrate they know how to do it, and they could explain it to somebody else,
Mhm.
they get it. And
Mhm.
so I think that's really kind of an important lesson that you've given to us today, is that what we have to do, see, math can be a scary subject to a lot of people. And what we have to do is give them encouragement, give them the challenge to learn an issue, to study an issue, and to get it right. And if we challenge them right, energy flows where the attention goes. And that's really where it is.
Exactly. It's very important for us to not bore them. If they already know it, we have to be prepared to let them keep moving, because that will unengage them. And the whole point of becoming to the point where we hate math is because we're not engaged, we're not understanding. So he made my point. I already know this, and she's
Yeah.
having me practice it. It was not worth his time. And their children are smart. I loved those pages because then I could repeat the same thing I knew all the time, and I looked really smart. So you have those kids too. But mostly, especially our boys, we have to keep them engaged.
Yes.
I have a quick question, Ray. What I've noticed with students, especially after the pandemic, is a lot of loss of math fluency. And I think in some ways, and I'm challenged with this idea that students, we spend so much time learning basic math facts, multiplication, all the way, 0 times 1, all the way to 12 times 12, that students, when they do have a good grasp of it, it's very solid. But when they get into a testing scenario where there's multi-step problems, they get really, if they do not have a good math fluency, they get encumbered, they start to slow down, and a multi-step math problem become very complex. And that's just a challenge that we've been having lately with students kind of post-pandemic. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I'm just going to jump in and say that's the accurate, efficient, and flexible thing, Danny, because if they go to a high stakes assessment, if they've been taught well, they'll have strategies for those facts. They'll know what tricks they can do to get there, or they might even have a help guide for them, but they have to be efficient at it eventually. Not
Yeah,
just fluent,
sure.
but right there as soon as they know their name.
Right. Thank
And
you.
by the way, every classroom from K to 12, but especially it started in 8th grade. What do you wish your students know? Basic facts. 5th grade, basic facts. 3rd grade, basic facts. Everybody goes all the way down to that problem, and they don't know what they're saying. And I'm sorry, I'm taking so much time again, but basically your first grader, your kindergartner should have a good concept of 10. Then your first graders should be able to begin to think about 20. Your second graders should start to have a concept of 1 to 100 mentally. They should be able to flex that way. And so what happens is they try to practice basic facts that are out of their cognitive ability. And so they never master them because they're trying to learn things they can't understand. But then when you get to third grade, they should know to 10,000, and fourth grade, 10,000 and beyond. They should be able to flex number in their head at the right iteration, and then they'll be more successful.
There's an interesting question here, Shawna, that I just picked up from, hope I'm saying this, Alistides. When you're teaching math to students and they show they understand it, then it comes to exam, they fail. What do you think is the problem?
Typically, it's a disconnect between efficiency and strategy. They don't know it enough. It's the 4-3. They don't know it enough to own it. They know it enough to perform it, but they don't know it well enough to teach somebody else. And a lot of times on our assessments, and that's kind of a complicated question, right? Because the other part of that is, how are we assessing? What are we asking them? Are we asking the right question? Because does our assessment match what we taught? We spent a lot of time with the backward assessment model back in the day talking about that. So if you have truly an assessment that matches what you taught and that's happening, then they just need a little bit more practice to get over the hurdle to the next level.
So more practice maybe with each other would help in their feeling that they do understand it, so that when they do come to an exam or a test or whatever, they've actually shared this. I raise an interesting point here, Shawna, and that is sometimes what really helps students learn is when they have to share this learning with another person.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I've used the example before. I learned a lot of things when I started teaching that I didn't really learn very well in my undergraduate work, because, now I have to explain it to somebody else. And that helped me to understand it at a much deeper level.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. There's many layers of understanding, and that's why it's hard to always show what a student knows on one of those paper assessments. And I like to think about it as a photo album. So I'm looking at more than one picture. I'm not only looking at that test, I'm looking at what they did away from me in centers and what they did on their homework and what they did on their practice. So I have a whole picture of what they know and not just that one moment.
We have some hands raised. If it's okay with you, Shawna,
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just start. Elton, you know, unmute yourself and ask your question. Elton Suleiman, I believe. You have to unmute yourself.
You should be able to unmute yourself now, Elton.
Maybe.
Are you there, Elton? Let's let you work. Let's go on to James. Can you unmute yourself and ask your question? Hello. Okay, well, there's Kalangi. We know Kalangi, and he has unmuted himself. So Kalangi, go ahead and ask your question. We're having some problems. Could any of the three of you perhaps write your question in the chat?
Oh, darn.
Well, so for any of the people who have a hand raised, could you just unmute yourself and ask your question? We're going to be successful with somebody here. We see Deborah and Farouz.
Looks like Farouz. He always does pretty good. There he goes.
Yeah, Farouz has good questions. He knows how. Go ahead, Farouz.
Thank you very much. Although I was so late, but I still have a question that really intrigues me. Could you please tell us any mathematical practice which is applicable to the field of English language teaching? Because I'm an English language teacher and I represent ITA Uzbekistan English Teachers Association. So there are people behind my back who are really curious about applying something from the field of mathematics to the teaching of English.
I understand.
Something which you can share with us? Thank you.
It's a very loaded question. I totally understand what you're saying on so many levels. There's a lot of pressure on us right now to cross-content teach, and we're trying to increase mathematics education. So we're asking everybody to do a little math in every class. What you can do is help with the problem-solving process. So, which is the same in science and the same in so many other contents. So the first thing we do is we define the problem, like what is this problem asking me to do? And then the next step in that is what can I hypothesize, or what do I think is going to happen? And then let me do some trial and error and see if that thing is true. And then let me respond to whether or not it was true or not. So simply following that logical thought process and maybe some writing, or maybe choosing some literature where there is a problem and you can talk it through, would totally be supporting your math content with your other colleagues. Is that a good example?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's one of the things we tell folks is just have them go through the process, write about it. One of the big things they need to be able to do in math is to communicate. So any oral communication they can do with each other, where they're pair sharing from time to time, because in mathematics now we have to talk to each other. So really they do go hand in hand in so many ways.
And Ferouz, I want to add something, and I believe I've shared somewhat of this before. When I first started teaching, I was an English teacher also. And, you teach English and you teach grammar and you teach spelling, and but when you get to the point where you can bring in other, for instance, let's say that you want your students to write an essay on the government, something about the government, and you get them to do some research. And when they're doing their research, how many representatives are there in the government? How many departments do each of these representatives sponsor? How many times so now you're getting them to think mathematically, and you can start with that, because I do believe it's possible to teach many subjects while you're teaching other subjects, but you have to think creatively rather than just doing an assignment on writing an essay about the government. How many representatives are there in the government? How many votes does it take to win the election? There's so many things that you can ask mathematical questions, and they don't even think about it being math. They just think of it as part of their English essay. So I think we have to be creative in those kinds of things. I remember giving an assignment like that once, and I was absolutely amazed at how students were able to figure out percentages and how they respond and the number of responses and so forth. And it was all part of their essay. So anyway, yeah, I think we just have to think creatively. You can do the same thing in physical education, and they're teaching physical education rather than having them just learn how to kick the ball or shoot the basket or whatever. What is the percentage of times that when you kick the ball, it goes where you want to go? And we have to think creatively about that. Sorry, Shawna,
It's okay. You brought up a good point, Ray. And first, I want to make one more point for you to take back to your people, because you said I got people behind me. In this PowerPoint is a rudimentary framework for content and processes. So I would look at that and think, well, don't focus on the algebra, math, and number side. Focus on the other side about building relationships. That whole text to self, text to world, all of that stuff is a part of those problem-solving strategies. So if you want to brainstorm something with your team, look at those process standards and think, how can we incorporate these processes in what we do? I hope that helps.
Tracy, did we get to your question yet? Can you unmute yourself? You've got your hand raised.
Maybe.
There
I'm
we go.
muting.
Okay.
Oh,
Hello, everyone. Hello, Ferouz. It's so good to see you. I remember having great conversation with you. So I had a couple thoughts. One is that that math language is so important. It's much like learning music. And so if a child learns music, they can play as a pianist. But if they don't, if they only learn a few chords, then they're not going to be exceptional. And so I had a teacher colleague one time who literally her whole classroom was filled with Mathlish, and she taught them every single Mathlish word so that they would know when it came up on a test or an assignment, they were familiar with that word. And I think that's one of the things that we forget in math is we're teaching algorithms and problem solving and stuff like that, but they don't understand the language. And I can tell you, because I am that person. The second thing I wanted to tell you is that when I was an undergrad, I had a really wonderful science professor, and he said something to me, and I'm going to age myself now because he said something to me 30 years ago that has stayed with me my whole life. And that is that math learning begins long before students enter the classroom.
Mhm.
Children should be playing with Legos, not the kinds of Legos they have now where they're Star Wars and they have directions, but the kinds of Legos where they have to use their brain and build things, because that is a critical factor of science and math. And I'm just going to tell you again, in my life, I have witnessed this. I have 4 children. One played with Legos constantly. We could not get him away from the Legos. He is a scientist, and he contracts for NASA now. The other 3 could care less about.
I tried.
2 are going to be therapists, and 1 is a dad. So I am living proof. Buy those big boxes of Legos that have no directions and let them create. That's
You
just
can
my
also
thought.
do that with rocks and sticks. It doesn't have to be anything fancy.
Or
Just,
Lincoln Logs.
yeah, anything. Mhm.
Thank
No,
you.
I appreciate what you said, Tracy, like the math language and having good collaboration between the math department, the English department about those content frequent words like difference or sum or compounding, those math terms that students are going to experience that will trigger them and target them into what they need to do and the operations that they need to start. The language portion of this, there's so much about what goes on in the science and math curriculum that is so language based, and we need to wordsmith and use words that are connected and can be universal to the students we teach. That was awesome.
I like what you said too. Math begins much sooner than you teach math. Much before you start teaching math. And I have to brag a little bit. I'll turn my computer. See right behind me here, that's Legos, Tracy.
It's funny she said that.
Yeah, I'm only doing this, Tracy, because you mentioned it. That's Legos. That's the Taj Mahal. 7,000 pieces in this Lego to put the Taj Mahal together. So only because you brought it up, Tracy, I had to say that. Deborah Daniel, you have your hand again. Let's see if you can unmute yourself and ask your question or make your comment. You'll have to unmute yourself. And I think that's not Deborah. That must be Deborah's computer. There we go.
Okay. Yes. How are you?
Good.
I'm from Tanzania.
Yes.
My name is Deborah Daniel. I have a suggestion, not a question, about the mathematics teachers. I'm the English teacher, but what I see about the mathematics teacher, they threaten the students. That when they enter in the classes, the issue they say it's mathematics is very difficult. That means if you say something is very difficult, even the students cannot even come up with you. So my suggestion is worldwide, math teachers, be close to the students and then don't tell them that it is difficult. Tell them that it is like a song. It's something like, you can be like a drama, even mathematics, you can dramatize, and then it could be simple. Thank you very much.
Tell them to watch Eddie Wu, because that's what he does. He shows the beauty of math in the world. That's a perfect example. I always try to say that, our attitude about it is what they're going to take away from it. And I cannot believe I didn't make a slide about relationship, because you are so right. You have to know your students. That's the most important thing.
Good. Well, we have time for one more question, and then we're going to close this. Anybody else with a question that is burning in your mind and you want to ask it?
I do this.
Great. Okay. I just want to say, I remember the story about a college high-level math class, Shawna, very high level, which you and I didn't attend. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. And at the beginning of the class one time, the professor put 5 problems on the board. And he said, these are 5 mathematical problems that nobody has ever been able to solve. And the class all saw that. Well, there was one student who was late to class, and he came after that had already been put on the board, and he realized he was late to class. So he wrote all 5 of these problems down on his paper and said, oh, that's my homework. I better do it. So he went home, and a week later, when he came back to class, he said, Prof, he said, I'm sorry, I was able to solve 3 of these, but the other 2 I just can't solve. And the whole idea was he was able, because he thought that was his requirement. So it was really an interesting story that I heard. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but it's a great.
It sounds believable to me.
Yeah, it could. Let me close with just a couple of things. And these have all been kind of emphasized today, Shawna, in the workshop. And thank you so much for leading us into the high level thinking about how we can make this work. But let's remind ourselves, but math is not about numbers, equations, computations, or algorithms. It is about understanding. That's Farou's the thought for today. And most of your work as a math teacher isn't about math. It is about helping students believe they can also do math. And that's helping them believe, and by finding ways to encourage them. So that's how we want to conclude today. Let me just talk a little bit now before we turn it over to Dr. Jake for final instructions. I want to talk with you about our last workshop of the year, of the school year, which will be May 21st. And we want you to know we are not going to have a guest speaker. We are going to, as your Array Global Administration, answer the questions that are on your mind, and you want to have us speak to those things. Maybe it's an issue that we haven't covered. Maybe it's a further explanation of an issue that we have covered. And so what we're going to ask you to do is to, when you send in your workshop evaluation today to get your certificate, and we were telling Shawna before the beginning about how important certificates are. But anyway, when you send out this, send in this registration or evaluation of today's meeting, please put your questions on there that you would like us to consider over the next 4 weeks. And we will make that the emphasis that we're doing on our May 21st workshop. And so please remember that we're going to have a very boring time sitting here looking at each other if we don't have questions from you. So thank you again, Shawna. And Danny, thank you so much for arranging to have Shawna with us today. I know that this was a wonderful presentation, and we've never really dealt with math like this before. So thank you so much.